My sister wanted me to sleep on her urine.
Hello everyone. Thank you for watching. I remind you that the scariest stories will be at the end.
I met a man who seemed fairly nice in the beginning. As time went by, I started to feel like I was walking on eggshells and nothing was good enough. He started to become outright nasty with criticisms and verbal abuse. The verbal abuse became cruelty, and suddenly I wasn't good enough. Everything I did, he would point out wrong slowly. My self-confidence was deteriorating. But as time went by, it became more insidious. There was a point in the relationship where I left, but I came back, and without me knowing for a while, he put me in the triangulation with a woman that he was seeing behind my back, the whole new relationship. The mind game started, and one day I was his girl and the next day I wasn't. The verbal cruelty continued, but then around the summer he assaulted me for the first time. We were sitting on the couch, and out of nowhere he started to rage, and he got up and he said, "I haven't killed anyone yet," and he grabbed my hair and he threw me across the room. I forgave him and we moved on. About a couple weeks later, he took out a knife. This was no kitchen knife, this was a 12-inch Rambo knife, and the same night he poured air freshener on me. He then later on that month threatened me with a knife again, and he put it to my stomach and he chased me down the stairs and choked me on the front lawn. He loved choking. He loved grabbing the neck. The reason why I know he's a psychopath, it's because I found out he has 5 or 6 prior restraining orders. He broke his ex's face, her eye sockets, and nose. He told me that he killed his dog, and that he sent many fires as a child, and that at the age of 13, he almost killed his stepfather with a screwdriver, and he was locked up at the age of 13. He also left me 3 times for different women and came back, and then left again and came back, was later I found out his narcissistic trait. And from what the research says, psychopaths are narcissistic. From the evidence that I gathered on domestic violence after I left, this man said that 25% of men and woman batterers programs are psychopaths. That's 1 out of 4. I believe in my heart and my soul he's a psychopath.
Once we had a girl in our class. It feels rude to call her a psychopath, but I think she had the signs. She was very thin, had a pathetic look, and was a new girl at that time. She was silent at first, but started to talk as we urged her. She told us her father was a woodcutter, and that her family lives in a faraway village. She said that she lives with her aunt in town, who is very rude towards her. She also told us that her aunt never gives her any food and makes her starve, and that her father comes to see her on weekends and buy her some food, which is the only food she rejoices. She would look despairingly at the ceiling, and suddenly tears would roll down on her cheeks. We got so upset with her story, we started to buy her food and all kind of things like pens, erasers, and notebooks, etc. We spent our pocket money all on her. She graciously took them all. We were all feeling like Mother Teresa, not knowing that we should actually feel like clowns. We would sit and talk how sad her story is, and glance back anxiously at her, making sure that she doesn't overhear us. But then one day, school parents' meeting was arranged. To that, class monitors should be there to direct parents to the respective teachers. On that day, our class monitor found out that her father is actually an officer in some government office. We were shocked beyond belief, and for the first time it struck us to ask her where she lives. She refused to give us her address, saying that her aunt doesn't allow her to. But then slowly her lies came to light. We asked our class teacher about this, and she said our friend lives with her father and mother in the town itself, and her mother is actually a primary teacher, and also that poverty was out of question in her family. We were so angry, and several incidents took place after that. Eventually, she left our school too. But thinking back, I feel a bit sorry, because she must have been in need of some sort of attention. That's why she created the whole story.
I once woke up to my little sister trying to smother me, but thankfully she was also too small to get the job done. We were 7 and 5. It was the first of 3 attempts she made on my life growing up. She did it because I had refused to sleep on her piss bed as a sacrifice to the boogeyman. Longer story. We had our own rooms, but I hadn't been allowed to sleep in mine for 2 years. She'd have a fit every time I tried to sleep in my own bed, and our parents would convince me to stay in her room just to get everyone to bed. They went so far as to install a bunk bed in her room, but she still insisted we share just one bed. One night I woke up to her wetting the bed. I was angry because I didn't even want to be there in the first place, and now I was covered in pee. She screamed at me to get back in bed, and when I didn't, she got up and tried to attack me, smearing yet more pee all over me. So we were both shrieking at this point, and our parents woke up and came down. I don't remember the exact conversation since it's been almost 30 years, but the gist of it was that first she demanded I sleep in the piss puddle, and she would just sleep against the wall and we'd pretend nothing had happened, and when my parents didn't agree, she became very distressed and admitted that she thought there was a monster in the closet, and had been insisting I sleep in the same bed with her so it wouldn't kill her, and she was terrified that if I moved back to my room, or even to a different mattress, she'd be eaten. Remember, she's only 5. My parents pulled the mattress off the top bunk and dragged the P1 outside and convinced me to be a good big sister and defend her from the monster. Reluctantly, I let myself be shuffled back into bed with her. I don't remember if it was that night or the next night, but as soon as we were alone, she whispered to me that she makes me sleep on the same mattress with her because someday the monster will come out to eat one of us, and she's going to escape while it's eating me. Without a word, I got up and moved to my room. I was willing to be there to defend her from her monster, but not to be a distraction for it. When our parents came down to investigate the screaming, I refused to move back to her room, and they finally relented. Later that night, I woke up because I couldn't breathe. My sister was on my bed trying to suffocate me with this blank, dead expression on her face. When our parents came back to investigate yet more yelling, she told them she'd just come into my room because she was scared of the monster. They didn't believe me that she was trying to smother me. I started sleeping with my door locked.
My aunt has 2 kids, both adopted, and all I know about their bio-moms is that they were drug addicts. One of them, we'll call her Jane, is my age, and we were always really close. But her older brother John never really hung around us to the point that I barely knew him, even though I spent a ton of time at their house. Anyway, when we were maybe 12, Jane, my sister, and I built a massive blanket fort in the basement, and were hanging out in it. John was maybe 15 at the time, and I don't know why he originally came in, but for some reason, he decided to mess with us by taking a large kitchen knife and randomly stabbing into the fort. We were trying to crawl away, but he could hear us, and followed to whatever section we were in. I'm not sure if blindly stabbing at your relatives can ever really be playful, but this was not it. Jane was screaming at him to stop, and my sister and I were crying. It was terrifying. Finally, my aunt heard us screaming and came down and yelled at him. John claimed it was just a joke, and said we were having fun. He's now in the middle of a 25-year prison sentence for murder. Social worker, outstationed in a welfare hotel in Manhattan, ran a soup kitchen among other things back in the 70s when they really cut back on psych hospitals. Call him Raoul, with a history of hospitalizations in forensic units, and disjointed stories about a lot of things, would come to my office and sharpen his machete with the stone we had for the soup kitchen knives. ZZZZZI3, ingigig, a long high sound in a very small office, seemed to soothe him some. After a few strokes, he would put it down and go for a walk with me in the park, where he would yell a lot. I think I was the only person he spoke with other than to buy cigarettes. He would go missing. Sometimes the police would bring him to me as he would trust me to watch his machete while he went away for a while. Never knew his last name, or where he lived. It wasn't in my hotel. He was clean, moderately well-groomed, and high in the top 10 batshit crazy people I met in that line of work, and there were many. Kinda miss him. A visit from Raoul certainly got the blood flowing, and yet strangely, it was a huge compliment that he could trust me. I work as a residential counselor at a home for boys. The client population has some very severe issues spanning behavior and sexual realms. The most traumatic event that occurred was with a 13-year-old boy who had not physically matured beyond age 8 and had not mentally matured beyond 6 due to neglect in his upbringing. After he arrived in the unit, the other boys began to complain about blood and feces being left on the toilet seat and stall walls. It was obvious that the new kid was the culprit, as he literally, and I mean literally, would go into the bathroom every 15 to 20 minutes. So, as a staff team, we naturally decided to increase bathroom supervision as much as ethically possible. One fateful evening, after the client had entered the bathroom, I positioned myself outside the bathroom door so as to monitor as much as I could. From my position, I could see the client's feet under the stall wall as he sat on the toilet. As I monitored, he got off the toilet, turned around and threw up. He also threw up a lot. He then got back on the toilet. After a minute or so, he again turned around and squatted in front of the toilet to throw up. As he squatted down, I was able to see his butt. He had 3 fingers, 3 knuckles deep, digging around in his anus as though he had a scratch he just couldn't get rid of, and his hand was covered in blood. It was the single most traumatizing event of my life. After taking him to the doctor, etc., turned out he had some pretty intense constipation, and at the age of 13, already had a prolapsed anus. Luckily, we were able to get him relatively stabilized over the course of 2 years, and the physical and mental changes he went through were remarkable, but I will never forget that image. I do work in a psych ward occasionally. Just recently, we were told to no longer leave pens or pencils out around the patients. Coworker left a highlighter on a shelf near the med window, attached to the daily discharge, court hearing schedule clipboard, and 45 seconds later, we figured out why no pens or pencils were allowed to be left out. A patient, who I had spoken with in passing and would have never expected this from, was furiously shoving the highlighter into his pee hole, and from the looks of his bruised penis, it may not have been the largest thing he had ever shoved into it. With many patients, it is obvious why they are staying. Others, only the doctors and the need-to-know nurses will ever know. This guy would have been the latter had I not walked around the corner and witnessed the pee hole annihilation of the century. I work in a forensic psychiatric ward. One day, a patient out of the blue punched a healthcare worker in the face. The victim was a 60-year-old African woman. Her nose was pissing blood everywhere, and she was out cold in a heap on the floor. We dragged her out of the room and closed the door with the patient in the room. He got down on all fours and began to lick her blood off the floor. Was pretty creepy.
Like, subscribe, and leave a comment. There will be a lot more cool content, and you will help me a lot.